President Biden said today that he would halt the shipment of U.S. offensive weapons to Israel, which he acknowledged have been used to kill civilians in Gaza, if the country moves ahead with the long planned ground invasion of Rafah. Now, this is the first time he has threatened to withhold U.S. military aid and the most direct threat he has made in the 7-month war. Biden made the comments during an interview with CNN airing tonight. Now, this is according to excerpts released by the network. An adult film actress, Stormy Daniels, took the witness stand at Donald Trump's New York criminal trial yesterday, testifying under oath about the sexual encounter she says she had with him in 2016 and the $130,000 deal for her silence that was struck during the closing days of the 2016 presidential campaign. It was a remarkable day of testimony with the former president sitting roughly 10 feet away from her. Daniels recounted the tryst in great detail. She also talked about Trump's supposed efforts to get her on his TV show and her decision to come forward with her story, as well as the payoff and the fallout from doing so. And in other Trump news, U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon has indefinitely postponed former President Donald Trump's classified documents trial in Florida, pending the resolution of multiple pretrial issues. The trial had been scheduled to start May 20th. Cannon said yesterday that she also said that additional hearings on some of the pending issues would be forthcoming, and the last one wouldn't take place until at least late July. That schedule would mean the case is unlikely to go to trial before at the earliest August of this year. Now, Trump has argued that going to trial in the weeks before the November election would amount to political interference because he should be otherwise campaigning. The White House last week halted a large shipment of offensive weapons to Israel over concerns that they would be used in Rafah. Now, tonight, we're going to hear Joe Biden say that he will indeed stop sending those shipments if indeed Israel moves forward with its military invasion of Rafah. And the Boy Scouts of America is changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history. It will become known as Scouting America. It's a significant shift as the organization emerges from bankruptcy following a flood of sexual abuse claims and seeks to focus on inclusion. President Joe Biden's election campaign announced $14 million in new spending. I'm going to take a little break and I'm going to get some water.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, it's Tavis Smiley. First, thank you for your support of KBLA Talk 1580. We deeply appreciate you. So, I get asked all the time, Tavis, when are you going to bring back that State of the Black Union symposium you used to do? You know the one where you had all those black intellectuals on stage every year and everybody watched all day live on C-SPAN? Yeah, I know the one.
Let's bring them back.
Well, I am pleased to tell you that if you go to KBLA1580.com right now, you can sign up to be in the audience here in Los Angeles when we go back live on C-SPAN with a stage full of black thinkers and influencers for a historic conversation. America has never seen a stage full of black folk talking about the urgency of now. Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. It's going down Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Admission is free, but you must register at KBLA1580.com. Once we reach capacity, you'll have to watch us on C-SPAN. But if you want to be in the room when we go live from Los Angeles, Tuesday, June 18th, head to KBLA1580.com right now to reserve your seat. Caring about the climate, caring about the community. With KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your blast.
I believe up there. Hey!
You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580, where climate is king. Climate is king.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. Visit jpmorganchase.com/racial equity and get the tools to help reach your financial goals.
Are you wet shaving? You'll get razor bumps.
Nah, Pops, I'm good with Gillette Skin Guard. How long you been growing that beard mama hates anyway?
Since 77, I shaved and got ingrown so bad.
That's why I use the Gillette Skin Guard razor, face scrub, shave gel, and moisturizer. So I don't have to worry about new razor bumps or shaving irritation.
Gillette Skin Guard, huh? Your mama's gonna love this one.
The best a man can get keeps getting better with Gillette Skin Guard. Buy now at a retailer near you.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
We are back, and I apologize. It is allergy season, and the best of my allergies are getting the best of me. Well, there's a lot of breaking news today, and I was talking about the Boy Scouts of America, who is changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history, and it will become known as Scouting America. Now, this is a significant shift as the organization emerges from bankruptcy following a flood of sexual abuse claims and seeks to focus on inclusion. Also, in the news today, President Joe Biden's re-election campaign announced a $14 million spend across battleground states. It's also launching an ad hitting Donald Trump hard on the issue of health care. The spending includes 7 figures that will target minority groups through TV, digital, and radio ads this month. It's looking to capitalize on its early fundraising advantage over Donald Trump. The move also comes on the heels of a $30 million ad onslaught in competitive states that began after Biden's State of the Union address in March. And House Republicans largely failed to land damaging blows today as they questioned public school leaders from 3 politically liberal parts of the country, accusing them of turning a blind eye to an alarming rise in anti-Semitism in classes on campuses since October 7th, Hamas's attack on Israel. Now, in contrast to similar congressional hearings for university leaders, which prompted upheaval at several colleges in recent months, the leaders of elementary and secondary school districts from New York, Berkeley, California, and Montgomery County, Maryland, held their own. And in some cases, these school leaders turned the charges of failing to confront anti-Semitism back on their Republican questioners. These school leaders came prepared, and they came prepared to stand their ground and to fight back those Republican lawmakers who attempted to get their own got you moment. And more than a dozen conservative federal judges are threatening to not hire law clerks who attend Columbia University or its law school starting this fall. Now, this is an attempt to show the judges' displeasure over the institution's handling of pro-Palestinian protests. In a letter to the university president at Columbia, 13 judges, who all were nominated by Donald Trump, said the university has become ground zero for the explosion of student disruptions, anti-Semitism, and hatred for diverse viewpoints on campuses across the nation. Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the independent presidential candidate who has marketed himself to voters as a younger, healthier alternative to the 2 major contenders who happen to be 79 and 82, we're now learning that Kennedy contracted a parasitic worm that got into his brain years ago and ate a portion of it before dying. The 70-year-old scion of the powerful political family revealed in a 2012 deposition during a divorce proceeding from his second wife. This deposition has been made public to the New York Times, and he admitted during the deposition that he had long-term memory loss and described himself as having cognitive problems. Well, Speaker Mike Johnson today batted down an attempt by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia to oust him from his post after Democrats linked arms with most Republicans to fend off a second attempt by GOP hardliners to strip the gavel from their party leader. The vote to kill the effort was an overwhelming 359 to 43, with only 7 Democrats voting present. Unlike the ouster that toppled Kevin McCarthy last fall, Democrats flocked to Mr. Johnson's rescue, with all but 39 of them voting with Republicans to kill the effort to oust him. Well, this is the news, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I'm joined by two very senior political analysts and veterans of this show, Dr. Raphael Sonnenschein, who is the executive director of the John Randolph Haynes and Dora Haynes Foundation. He goes by the name of Rafe. At least that's what he allows his good friends to call him. Also, Ed Sanders is joining us in this hour. He is also a very experienced and veteran political analyst. And in hour two, what we do, that's the hour where we go behind the headlines, we dig deep, and we bring you those stories we are talking about, or people are talking about, I should say. And in hour two, we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state. Now, that has been a basic and foundational principle of the U.S. since its founding. But if certain GOP lawmakers and religious leaders have their way, they want to see that separation be less separate. They'd like to see religion and religious practices and religious rituals and traditions reintroduced into not just private religious schools, but in public schools across this country. I'm going to talk to an expert about the dangers of trying to end what has been this foundational principle of separating the church from the state, i.e., taking prayer and other religious rituals out of public schools. Is this going to be an issue in the 2024 presidential election? So we're going to get you up to speed on what's happening in terms of efforts to cause public schools to rethink the issues of religion. But before we get to hour two, we've got to talk about all this breaking news today. So I'm happy to welcome back Rafe and Ed. Thank you so much for joining me in this hour. A lot of breaking news. First, this big story, Rafe, about Joe Biden. Apparently on CNN tonight, he's going to send a pretty strong message to Benjamin Netanyahu that if you go into Rafah and invade it, you are going to suffer some pretty severe consequences, including having the U.S. halt the shipment of offensive weapons. What do you make of this announcement by the president?
It's been coming for weeks, essentially. It's been in the cards. And he's very shrewd about this. He's making a distinction between offensive and defensive. Remember, only a few weeks ago, the U.S. led a coalition to head off Iranian missiles coming into Israel in an extraordinary defensive effort that really earned a lot of credibility, even more for Biden in Israel, which is very important. He has a very big base in Israel because of there's been very few American presidents as deeply supportive of Israel. But it's gotten to the point where he said it would be a mistake to go in, it would be wrong to go in. And at a certain point, you start to look weak and as you're ineffective. And I think this was just a series of steps. And this message is a startling message in some ways, and in other ways, not startling at all. It does not change his strong support for Israel, but it definitely sends a message to Netanyahu's government, which, of course, has its own issues domestically in Israel.
No, this is a big announcement, Ed. I know we've talked about this multiple times on the show, and you've been a big proponent of Biden taking a harder stance against Israel. So what do you make of this news that Biden is saying to Benjamin Netanyahu, you go into Rafah, you invade Rafah, you're going to have a problem on your hands in the U.S.?
Well, I think a number of factors, right? This is a presidential year, and I don't think any of the presidential candidates take strong stances void of the election and the upcoming campaign. I think the recent events on the campuses across this country you can see that they're having an impact on what Biden is thinking. You can see the pressure, and that from his vote and his coalition, he can see the fractures. I'm not surprised that he's taken the stance. To Ray's point, it's a long time coming. It'll be interesting to see exactly what he says and what all is laid out in this. Because I think in the past he's actually echoed some of this to Netanyahu in the past, and Netanyahu and just goes forward and does what he's going to do. It'll be interesting to see what sort of markers are in place, what has to happen in order to trigger action from the administration.
You mentioned those protests that are happening across campuses leading up to commencement exercises on many of these big college campuses. Rafe, were you surprised that it was the secondary school principals and superintendents that went to Capitol Hill today and basically handed the Republicans a no thank you, not on our watch kind of performance today? They did not back down. They did not kowtow to these Republicans, Virginia Fox and crew, the way that we saw these Ivy League presidents who just botched their appearance before this House Republican-led Education Committee. But these secondary school leaders were strong. Well, maybe they did their homework, but I was just blown away by their responses today.
I'm having a little fun with this. I'm remembering my high school principals, my 6th grade teacher, my civics teacher in 10th grade. They would not have been afraid of a hearing like this. University presidents are at sea when they're on Capitol Hill. They don't know what to do. They don't know whether to kiss up to the senators and get in trouble at home or be defensive. They let the senators ask anything they want to ask. The principal said, I'm talking now. I'm talking just the way my high school principal used to talk. These are the people in education who have street smarts, which university presidents do not have. They're often out talking to their whole network of alumni and talking to faculty and talking to students, but it's kind of up here. Have you ever met a public school leader who is not like on the ground, not taking anything from anybody? So it totally shocked those members of Congress because they thought, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of, high school and folks like that. Did they go to high school? Do they have any recollection? I don't know.
I think you're right, Ray. If you think about principals, they have to walk the hallways. They've got to, break up fights. They've got to stare down gang members. They've got to, get the bad kids or the kids who are disrupting. I don't call them bad kids, but those, disruptors out of their schools. They have to deal with real life issues on a regular basis. And Ed, they were not having it. They were not letting these Republicans paint them as anti-Semitic, as running, schools that hated Jewish students. I mean, they were really, really aggressive in pushing back. And I was glad one of them said, look, yeah, we're fighting anti-Semitism, but we're also fighting Islamophobia. We're fighting against all hatred. And they just, I think, set a tone that's hopefully will help the next set of university principals. I don't feel bad for her, but the Columbia University principal, she went there, tried to kowtow to him. Mike Johnson shows up at her campus 2 days later, calls for her ouster. And now 13 Trump-appointed judges said, if you go to Columbia University, one of the Ivy League's best top 5 law school in the country, you can't be a federal clerk, which is the most ridiculous, just politically motivated comments coming from federal judges that you can imagine. So this is what this university president gets for Columbia University president gets for going there trying to, capitulate and curry favor with the GOP lawmakers.
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned the high school presidents, the high school principals. I can only imagine what the last few years has been like as a principal on a campus. If you go back to 2020 and sort of the Black Lives Matters movement, and then carry it forward into a lot of the social justice conversations that's been held, I'm not surprised by their reaction because students, time and again, who are, really getting all of their information from social media. You're seeing this new generation of young people that are getting their content direct from whatever issue. If there is a march, they're getting video footage and commentary straight from it. In the case of the conflict in Gaza, you were seeing the violence very directly on social media. And now as a teacher and a principal, trying to help young people process that it's probably been an incredible sort of challenge over the last few. And what I think you saw were principals that have certainly had conversations with their students, help them to distill what issues are at play here and be very clear on what they are standing up for and what they are not tolerating. And I don't think it could be said any clearer. The violence in Gaza was excessive. Anti-Semitism is not tolerated. And, they're not. It's not one or the other. It's both.
Yeah, no, kudos to them. And I hope again with some Yale University, I think Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and a couple of others have been summoned to this. I don't even want to call it a hearing, this performative event to give these lawmakers an opportunity to go viral, to get a viral moment. So hopefully these university professors will learn something from the secondary school leaders. I got to talk about that testimony yesterday, Rafe. We have never, ever seen a former president on trial in a state court room 10 feet away from a woman describing in great details a sexual encounter she had with someone who wants to be the next president of the United States. Put this into historical context for us, what we witnessed with Stormy Daniels' testimony yesterday.
Historical context, like ever. Now, consider that she was under orders not to be graphic. I mean, what you saw was the expurgated version of what you could tell she was dying to say. She is an unusual witness. You can't keep her within bounds. She's got a story she wants to tell, and she was going to get that story out. And it was not a story that Trump really wanted to hear. I think that his lawyers didn't know whether to object or not. They were kind of confused. They asked for a mistrial because what do you do with a witness like that? But historically, the closest we came was that very calm TV interview with Bill and Hillary Clinton, where they said there were problems in their marriage. And people were like, oh my God, this is like X-rated. I guess our country has changed a lot, but mostly Donald Trump has changed our country because he's not like anybody else who's ever been in politics. It's one long soap opera. But this one is not to his benefit because he likes to be the star of the soap opera. And she was pretty much the star.
Yeah, this is like Obama's brown coat. That's the most salacious thing, that brown suit that he wore, or Michelle taking her official White House photograph, with sleeves, no sleeves on her dress. But now we're hearing about silk pajamas and condoms, Ed, and, sexually transmitted diseases. And it really was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah, I think Rafe makes a good point. The country's changed a great deal. I can recall a book by Bob Woodard that sort of spoke about during the Clinton scandal how the veil of I won't call it respect for privacy, but had been pulled down, right? And if you think back to if there was an alleged affair between Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe, that just you didn't talk about that publicly, certainly not in the media, and for sure that didn't make it to the courts. And now, fast forward, the 50, 60 years, we're sitting in a courtroom with the former president of the United States and listening to a porn star give testimony. That is wild to think about. If you would go back in time to the 1940s and say that was going to happen, there's no way you could believe that Stormy Daniels would even be allowed in court, that she would have the credibility to speak. That's one. And then two, that you would hear a former president actually have to listen to sordid details. Quite a time. Yeah,
and those details. Now, I'm a lawyer, and different legal pundits have been weighing in on whether her testimony helped or hurt from a legal standpoint, and whether it's set up a potential appeal if there is a conviction. But putting all that aside, the level of details, Rafe, that she provided makes it really, really hard. Even though she's given some inconsistent statements in the past, and there's, obviously the defense is trying to paint her as a gold digger that's trying to extort Trump and is telling this story. I don't know how you would make up these details. I think that was what was so shocking about the testimony, her level of detail. And that's what she wanted to get out, to try to say to folks, look, I may have lied about, this to different outlets after it happened. But when I get through telling you the details of this, it's going to be close to impossible for you to believe that this didn't happen.
Her weakness is irrelevant, which is her motivation, whether she wanted money or not. They made a big deal. Well, of course she wanted money, for God's sake. She was negotiating money. But it has the ring of truth when she knows what the tile looked like in the bedroom. She seems to remember everything, but the most devastating detail was his saying that, don't worry about my wife, it's not a problem. When one of his defenses in this case is that the reason he wanted to cover this case up was to protect the delicate sensibilities of his wife. She's believable on the details, on the motivations. I think it's all over the place and probably not very credible, but it probably doesn't really matter. It's the details that matter.
Yeah, and this isn't a guy that has a reputation for caring about his wives with, plural. We know he's engaged in all kinds of conduct that is embarrassing and humiliating to his wives. And to think that now all of a sudden he's gotten a case of let me protect my wife doesn't seem very credible at all. I can't imagine how this gets any worse for Donald Trump from a political standpoint, but it can, because we're going to hear from Michael Cohen, who also is going to tell us in great detail, I would imagine, about this scheme, how it was hatched, how it was put together, how it was put into place, and how it was actually executed, and how Donald Trump's fingers are all over it. Not a good look for someone who says they want to be the president of the United States. Questions of credibility, ethics, just so many questions raised by this trial altogether, falsifying business records, just creating all kinds of false stories, suppressing stories, promoting stories about his opponents. I just don't think we can ever forget all of these details and how significant they are in terms of assessing and telling us everything we need to know about the character, which is why when we come forward, we're going to talk about Paul Ryan, the former GOP Speaker of the House, says it is because of his lack of character that he will not be voting for Donald Trump. Also got to talk about Robert Kennedy. Says he has memory loss and cognitive problems, but yet he says he's the more qualified person to be president of the United States, and the Dems have saved Mike Johnson. We've got lots to talk about. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is getting a new Democratic challenger in his bid for re-election next year. Selnor Myrie, a state senator from Brooklyn, is the second Democrat to officially declare his intent to challenge Adams and has set up an exploratory committee to begin raising funds. In a written statement, Myrie said that voters are tired of the current mayor's, quote, showmanship, end quote, and are yearning for results. Former city controller Scott Stringer announced similar plans earlier this year. Democrats are responding to a Time magazine interview with former President Donald Trump about his aspirations to return to the White House. Speaking on MSNBC, Los Angeles Congresswoman Maxine Waters said it is clear to her that the people aligned with Trump will wage a violent civil war if Trump loses the election. Waters, who is Black, said she'll ask the White House what the plan is to protect America if Trump loses the election in November. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Back in Willowbrook, the stall remains blocking 2 right lanes on the 105 East before Central Avenue, while stop traffic continues from the 405 over 40 minutes. Sigler involving a crash still blocks the truck lanes of Granada Hills 5 South before the 405, and stop traffic continues over 35 minutes from the Lyons Avenue, Pico Canyon Road interchange. Now, this was from earlier this morning involving a big rig accident and fire cleanup that involved 2 big rigs, and one of the trucks was engulfed. The good news is that the carpool lane as well as all 5 lanes are reopened. Just the 2 truck lanes are still blocked.
Need money for the holidays? Avoid the yikes before Christmas. Hurry into Jackson Hewitt for a holiday loan on your tax refund, up to $1,000. Early refund advance offered to eligible clients. Application required. Finance charge applies. Loans by Republic Bank. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Former LA Sparks star Candace Parker was named president of Adidas Women's Basketball. The 38-year-old Parker will oversee marketing and business operations for the women's basketball division of Adidas. In 2010, Parker was the first female athlete to have a signature shoe deal with Adidas. Parker retired last week from the WNBA. She played 13 of her 16 seasons with the Sparks. The Denver Nuggets got a break. Jamal Murray will not be suspended for throwing items onto the court Monday night in Game 2 in the Western Conference semifinals against Minnesota. Instead of a 1-game suspension, the NBA fined Murray $100,000. Murray will be in the lineup for Game 3 Friday night in Minneapolis. North Carolina Central will play Norfolk State in the 40th annual Circle City Classic football game in Indianapolis. The HBCU Classic is scheduled for Saturday, September 28th. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Here come the drums.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, you know, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it. Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Fight the power.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare?
If so, the new LA Care plan called Medicare Plus can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0.
LA Care provides personalized service to Angelinos like us.
Plus, it gives us access to doctors and specialists across Los Angeles County.
For zero cost, we get access to full benefits.
From vision coverage,
in-home support services,
to prescription drug coverage,
and a quarterly over-the-counter allowance.
plus personal equipment.
Meal programs,
a gym membership,
and so much more.
For more than 25 years,
LA Care has provided Angelinos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost.
For our families,
our seniors,
our community,
it's a plus.
It's a plus
for all of us.
City of Los Angeles tenants, verify your Emergency Renters Assistance Program status today if you applied for the program. Tenants approved for rental assistance are protected from eviction for non-payment of rent through May 31st, 2024. And it's illegal under law for landlords to refuse rental assistance to you based on your source of income. Refusing assistance can be used as an affirmative defense in an eviction case. So check your application status now at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and
We are back and we are tackling today's breaking and trending news with Ed Sanders and Raphael Sonnenschein. And in hour two, we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state. Is that likely to remain a thing in this country? It's been a bedrock or one of the bedrock principles of our country since its founding. But if certain GOP leaders and lawmakers had it their way, that separation would no longer exist. So make sure you stick around for hour two. All right, Ed, Robert F. Kennedy says he was or is the healthier alternative to the two older men, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, who are going to be the choices that Americans have this November. But we're learning that he said in 2012 he had some kind of parasitic worm that got into his brain that left him with cognitive problems and long-term memory loss. What do you make of that, and how might this impact his already fledgling campaign as an independent candidate, third-party independent candidate?
Yeah, I mean, it is just that, right? He's a third party. He is, to your point, I would say struggling in the polls. You know, the issue of age and this conversation of the capacity of the older gentleman running for president is going to be at the forefront of this race. You know, I tend to step back and look at it. Look, both of them are leading two parties that have a dearth of talent throughout. Their age, while consequential, they are not alone in running for office, and nor will they be alone in terms of setting an administration and running it. And you know, as a country, we have mechanisms to deal with an incapacitated leader. From Robert Kennedy's perspective, look, I think he's finding ways to stay in the news where people continue to talk about, the one issue that I think is on everyone's mind, which is Trump's age and Biden's age, and try to cast it in some way for him to be support. But ultimately, I think, look, most people have kind of chosen, if I'm going to vote for Biden, if I'm going to vote for Trump. Those that aren't going to do it, yeah, he's appealing, but I don't think he's going to woo any undecided voters his way.
Yeah, he's trying to stay in the news, Rafe, but do you want to be in the news as having a parasitic worm in your brain? This is the kind of news that helps a candidate. Now, obviously, this is probably some opposition research. Somebody in the Biden campaign or Trump campaign got a hold of these 2012 deposition transcripts and say, "Ooh, we got some good information here." But this could be, again, disqualifying for someone that acknowledged that they have cognitive problems.
Well, Ed's 100% right. I mean, I completely agree. This is not a successful assault on the age of the other candidates. Now, nothing's disqualifying anymore, in this new world we're in. It's hard to imagine what's disqualifying. He just needs to get the name Kennedy to be out there all the time. There was a candidate in Massachusetts, Ed, I think decades ago, who ran for Congress whose name was John F. Kennedy. And he did really, really well. He had no relationship to the Kennedys whatsoever, which is not far from this guy, even though he's technically related. I was really startled by his saying that this worm ate part of his brain. Now, I have two thoughts about that. One is, in the Christy Noam tour era of I'm a great hero because I shot my dog, a worm that ate parts of my brain, I don't know that that's your lead, but I'd also would probably want to have an MD say that, who doesn't work for you, who actually has a job as a doctor somewhere, who puts that in writing. I read that if you have a worm in your brain, it can cause damage, but cells form around it and it kind of blocks it off, so you can't remove it, but it doesn't eat your brain. I don't know. Eating your brain does strike me as perhaps pushing the boundaries of disqualifying, but hey, I don't know anymore. I've lost track of that.
Well,
Look,
I'm
I
glad
think
you
the
brought
fear
up
for it is they
the
have
dog
the
shooting.
tinfoil.
I'm glad you brought up the dog shooting governor, because it seems like her whole party is upset with her. Even Fox News hosts are not happy with her, and she seems to be outraged, Ed, that people are outraged. She seemed to have really bought into some notion that bragging about shooting a dog would make her more popular, would make her like, this tough woman, almost like, Sarah Palin wrestling with polar bears, and that she would get the attention of Donald Trump. I don't think she could have anticipated this backlash. It's the same thing happening with Marjorie Taylor Greene. These flamethrowers and provocateurs seem to not be having as much of an impact as they had. We could talk about Marjorie trying to oust Mike Johnson, and Democrats coming to save him. What did you make of that? And just tie that into Marjorie Taylor Greene and Christy Noam and these
Well, I mean, look,
weird
first things first,
Republicans.
it behooves everyone in this country to have a black friend, right? Because if you thought that shooting a dog was going to get you over in this country, you just need only look to football and one of our favorite ball players, and Michael Vick. You kick a dog, you do anything to a dog, and we're going to run you into federal pen. And
Yeah, she obviously did not know about Michael Vick and all the
Right.
torture that he experienced over a dog.
Yeah, and so the little Sarah Palin stick that she's running is nice, but it obviously isn't going to get over. I think every urban center across this country, every rural center across this country, you look up and people have dogs left and right, and I think the big debate is when you have children and you hear people say like that equate their pet to their children, and it's like, wow, okay, pets are important, and they definitely are to Americans. And so shooting your dog doesn't fly.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. And you raise a good point. Michael Vick, I hadn't thought about him, but yes, we all can remember what happened to him, his career, all over shooting a dog. She's learning a pretty tough lesson. So is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Rafe, she thought that she could waltz into the halls of Congress and out Mike Johnson in the way they did with Kevin McCarthy. But Mike Johnson seemingly is liked by Democrats, and they came to his rescue. Were you surprised by this?
I wouldn't say he's liked by Democrats. I would say that Kevin McCarthy was hated by Democrats. But fortunately, everybody hated Kevin McCarthy. Republicans hated him, Democrats hated him. So that was actually a bipartisan feeling. They don't particularly hate him, and they actually think he was moderately courageous on the foreign aid bill. Hakeem Jeffries, let's face it, is practically the speaker right now. And that doesn't get much media coverage because, it's not a good story because Democrats are supposed to be losing all the time about everything. They have like a 1-vote majority, and he's staying in office because of Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic caucus. He may stray and get in trouble with the Democrats. And if that happens, Marjorie Taylor wins. Marjorie Taylor Greene wins. She gets him out. He said the other day that illegal voters, what they called illegal voters, whatever that means, are in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, but there's no evidence. That's what he said at a press conference. Too much of that, Democrats may have second thoughts. But right now, I think they feel he has a little bit of integrity that McCarthy did not have. They thought he was just dishonest with them. And actually, most Republicans thought that too. So I wouldn't say that's friends. Ed, do you think that's friendship, or do you think that's
Yeah, I think it's just I agree with you. I think he has probably been more straightforward than McCarthy, who was very slithery. But I also think that if Johnson is removed, the chaos that ensues is really what folks are trying to avoid, right?
Yeah.
It took, what was it, 6? I don't remember. It was a ton of votes just to get Johnson in. And I don't know who would want it next, right? Like, if he's out, I don't know what the next candidate looks like. What is clear, though, and from Marjorie Taylor Greene's perspective, is that block of House Republicans, the Matt Gaetz, the guy, as far right and as crazy as they are, they still hold a very significant conversation in national politics. That she could challenge him is just to let them know. I don't think she's weakened one bit by this. And in fact, I think she's probably raised a ton more money just by sticking her head up. And so, glad he stays because it keeps some measure of stability. Biden certainly doesn't need to deal with a tumultuous House Speaker vote in the middle of trying to get his campaign up. So I suspect that all those are at play there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, bravo to Hakeem Jeffries, who's demonstrating his readiness already to be the leader of the House. He obviously learned from the best. He learned from Nancy Pelosi. He learned how to count votes. He learned how to keep his caucus together. And not only is he keeping his caucus together, now he's keeping the Republican caucus together. And now Mike Johnson owes the Democrats. And I'm sure Hakeem Jeffries is not going to let him forget that. And not only does Mike have to worry about the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and those on the far right of his own party, he now has to, as you said, Rafe, make sure he doesn't stray too far into those conspiracy theories and, into that MAGA world, because the Democrats hold the key to him being in that position. And at any time, if they signal to Marjorie, okay, we're ready, Mike Johnson will be a goner. When we come forward, I talk about Paul Ryan says he is not voting for Donald Trump. So is the former lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia and other prominent Republicans. Might this be a significant break in Donald Trump's support? Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
We ask seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up.
Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number and put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month. If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
call your senior Medicare patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Environmental justice is racial justice.
Environmental justice is social justice.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminding you that we keep us safe. Pro Football Hall of Famer and urban peace pioneer Jim Brown believed in just that. So he founded the Amera I Can Foundation for Social Change in 1988, focusing on at-risk and high-risk youth in underserved schools and juvenile detention facilities, as well as adult incarceration and reentry initiatives. The core of the Amera I Can program is its 15-chapter life skills curriculum. Mastery of these skills allows individuals to meet their academic potential, conform their behavior to acceptable societal standards, and improve the quality of their lives by equipping them with what they need to confidently and successfully contribute to society. Today, the foundation is led by its president, Monique Brown, who has been actively involved in the organization for more than 25 years. The Amera I Can Foundation continues its work in memory of its founder, actor, philanthropist, and NFL legend Jim Brown. To get involved or make a donation, please visit AmeriICanCommunity.partners. That's AmeriICanCommunity.partners. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and in this hour, Ed Sanders and Raphael Sonnenschein, they're here. Both of them are here helping me break down today's breaking and trending news. And in hour two, we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state. All right, Rafe, Paul Ryan, former House Speaker, is saying, and he is on the record saying, that he will not vote for Donald Trump. He's the second high-profile Republican just this week that came out with such a statement. The former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia also said he couldn't support Donald Trump. He even went further and said he was going to vote for Joe Biden and then work to get congressional leaders on the GOP side elected to keep a check and balance on Joe Biden. Now, Paul Ryan said he's going to write in another Republican candidate. But, you know, what do you make of these high-profile Republicans coming out against Donald Trump, saying the quiet part out loud, that this guy morally is not fit, that he has a huge character problem that disqualifies him from being the president?
Historians will probably ask, why were there so few, not why are there so many? And very few of them are active office holders or people with a future. And they come in two categories. There's the Pence category, which you would call profiles and almost having courage, which is people who basically won't support him. Pence won't say he won't vote for him. He just says he won't endorse him. And Ryan says he'll vote for another Republican write-in. On the other hand, in fairness, these are a way station for people, possibly to eventually vote for Joe Biden. And the way station is, first, I won't vote or support Trump. Now I'm not sure what I'll do. And then as the campaign goes on and it becomes a two-person race with the stakes as they are, some people may go farther and say they're going to vote for Biden as the only alternative to really stop Trump. So it's fascinating to watch. It's both amazing how few there are compared to 1964 when Barry Goldwater was the nominee and tons of Republicans abandoned the Republican ticket, and how unsafe it is to do that right now. I'm not sure a lot of people won't want to, but I don't think they feel very safe doing it.
Yeah, you know, a lot of these Republicans, of course, those wanting to be the vice president with Donald Trump, Ed, not only will they not abandon him, he has made it a requirement that you also support him in the big lie that he still won the 2020 election. We thought he would abandon that, but he hasn't, and he won't say that he will accept the results of the 2024 election. And so he's also requiring those that want to be vice president to agree that they are not necessarily going to accept the outcome. This is very scary. We saw what happened in 2020, all the lawsuits, all the turmoil, the attack on the Capitol. We have now a conservative Supreme Court. We have a court that is doing Donald Trump's bidding in some ways with respect to not moving forward with the federal prosecution that has been brought against him by Jack Smith, the special counsel. We see Ida Cannon in Florida, who has just delayed the classified documents case indefinitely, seemingly just, again, kowtowing to Donald Trump. But how scary is it that Trump and team are saying, if we don't win this time, doesn't matter because we're never going to admit that we didn't win?
Yeah, I mean, there's been such a conversation around sort of the future of the country. To jump back in on the Paul Ryan really quick, I think, one other motivation to look for in this is that I think he's hedging his bet that Trump loses. I would say this, to the extent that his voice carries in Wisconsin and he can influence votes in the Midwest and that blue wall holds for Biden, great. And it's actually great for him. He's 54, mid 50s, somewhere in there. Former vice presidential candidate, former speaker. I think he would be at the top of the list of any prospective Republicans that want to run in 4 years. I think he would be excited about that possibility. So I think, in weighing what he's saying, I think there's some selfishness there. I think ultimately, how this country reacts is really what keeps me on edge. I think we've seen the January 6th, but we've seen some really stark challenges to what we would think democracy is. And the response hasn't really been strong. You can look at the Biden administration and the attorney general, and it's really fallen to states to prosecute former President Trump. And you look at Merrick Garland as the attorney general, and you say, well, where have you been? We're just now getting around to these trials, and these things should have been almost day one, almost as soon as he was sworn in as the attorney general. And so there's a part of this where I don't trust the Democratic side of the equation to actually stand up for democracy, and if Trump challenges or puts forward such a challenge.
Well, Rafe, even if the Democrats stand up, and when they have stood up, you're standing up to a Supreme Court that's stacked against you. Jack Smith has done everything humanly possible. No one could have imagined that the Supreme Court would even take up the case that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals determined on the issue of immunities. Everybody thought that was a no-brainer. Of course you're not immune from all criminal prosecutions. Of course you're not above the law. But in comes the Supreme Court and says, well, maybe that's too quick of an analysis. We need to review this. And maybe there's some, carve out here. And by the way, we'll get around to it, after this election. So I'm not certain that the Democrats are going to have an opportunity to stand up the way the courts are stacked.
Democrats have always had more faith in the courts than Republicans have, going back to the Earl Warren court, which is, is in very, very distant memory. I don't think the courts are going to save the country. But I do want to point one other thing about that. It's not a person. It's the people who are voting for Nikki Haley, who's not on the ballot and not running anymore in state after state. That's a story that should be covered a lot more. In other words, if you want to do some good polling, who are these people? I mean, I know there's some polling, but it's consistent. Anywhere from 25% to 30% of Republican voters are continuing to vote for Nikki Haley. There's a way station there, but there's no Republican elected officials who provide them a sort of a model who can lead them that way, but they may be going on their own. And Joe Biden is very smartly saying, hey, if they don't want you, we want you. We want you in our tent. And
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because Trump has reached his ceiling. We don't talk enough about that. His voters are loud and they make a lot of noise and they get a lot of attention, but there is a ceiling. And there are those Republican voters, not all like Paul Ryan, who have a platform and who they vote for becomes national news. But you're right. There are, 30% of Republicans who are not voting for the Republican candidate. And many, like Paul Ryan, say they will never vote for him. So that's going to be a problem for Donald Trump in this election, an election that could be very tight, and an election where, this Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, soap opera, as you called it, is going to continue to be played out. Last word for you, Ed, before we let you go. What do you make of these Trump-appointed judges saying to law students, saying to undergraduate students, if you go to this one university, we're singled out this university, and because we hate this university's president, we're not going to hire you. Is that like the most childish, ridiculous thing from some federal court judges?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't believe them. I think with any of the judges, you kind of look for the best qualified candidate, and conservative judges are going to look for conservative clerks. Liberal judges are going to look for liberal clerks. And if there is a conservative family that has a law school student that has a way to put forward an applicant, I don't think they're going to turn that away. So I think it's all posturing in the media.
Again, different country. This would have never happened 10 years ago. Federal judges would have never, ever wade into these culture wars in the way we see these judges doing today. Oh, we've got to buckle up because we've got a rough ride, I think, between now and November. And I'm so glad that I have both of you to help us make sense of all this breaking news. Thanks so much for joining me again today. We're out of time. See you both back here real soon. When we come forward, hour 2, we're going to be talking about the separation of church and state and how Republican lawmakers want to change one of the most fundamental principles of our democracy. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.